All right.
Okay, so I think we are gonna go ahead and start. So, thank you everyone for being here in another Tropilunch. For today talks, we have Luis Forlane. He earned his PhD in anthropology at UF in 1997. His interests lie in the area of ecological anthropology, sustainable development, indigenous knowledge, and racial ethnic identity. His work is primarily focused on the Brazilian Amazon, where he has worked since 1987 among indigenous and Caboclo communities. He has engaged in work in environmental impact studies, land demarcation, and nutritional studies, in addition to examining transformation in indigenous communities regarding interethnic contact and development in the Amazon. So without introduction, Luis, thank you for sharing with us your work. And now you can start your presentation. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you, everybody. And from one gator to another gator or gators. Okay, well, I'm really pleased to be back here, okay, within this little purview, this space. I mean, like we say in Portuguese, os tempos são outros, né? But well, here we are re-engaged, right? So, really glad, okay, I can share this with you all and pleased to see how much TCD, okay, and anthropology have really grown and expanded in leaps and bounds there at Florida. Man, it's pretty fantastic what UF has been doing. So, uh, I've been kind of out of touch and just tangentially engaged with some friends there, like Mike Heckenberger and others with Russ Bernard sometimes too. But okay, let me go cut right to the chase here for you. All right, hang on a second. And if you have any questions, you can just stop me anytime. Okay. You want me to talk for about 30 to 40 minutes, right?
Yes, that's
Oh,
correct.
okay. All right. Fantastic. So, land, space, place, and memory reflections on the establishment of the Mosaic Gurupi in Brazil's eastern Amazon region. So, many of you have already been around the block. I'm sure you're very familiar with this concept of conservation units in Brazil. They call them mosaicos, okay? And in this case, we were able to establish over, a long drawn out battle of more than 10 years to get this land created for the indigenous groups, okay? Also with local, Caboclo and recent settled communities in this region. And as you know, the eastern part of the Amazon is the beginning of that arco, né? That arc of destruction is probably one of the most compromised areas of that arc. I mean, that could be heavily disputed if we look at the southern tip of the arc too, right? That's pretty a challenged place as well, right? But yeah, um, this is an area that used to be, remember, kind of more toward the eastern part, the big, like what they call the Celeiro de Belém, especially in the Paraense side. But now, okay, we've had these indigenous reservations here, right, or we reserves, like we call them in Brazil, the Alto Turiaçu, right there, all the Terra Indígena Wa, Caru, right, and down more towards the south, okay, in the transition zone of Maranhão, we have the Terra Indígena Araribóia. And coupled with this, we have the Reserva Biológica assim, do Gurupi, right? On the Paraense side, we have the Terra Indígena Alto Riguamá, right? So altogether, okay, this is a very, significant size of land, right? And as you can see in the map on the left there, just to give you situate people who aren't familiar with Brazil, it's in that wedged in that particular region there in the eastern part of the Amazon, right? And the big dividing line right there is the Gurupi River, right? That splits, Maranhão, okay, from Pará. Many people often considered Maranhão what they call, the Meio Norte because its western part is more Amazonian in terms of the people and the environment, right? And then the eastern part of it, and the southeastern is more like nordestino, if you will, also in terms of the people who have settled the region and so on. But there's a lot of movement going on in the region. We'll talk about that in a second, right? So here's some little a quick little fact sheet for you in terms of the mosaico. It's about the size of Vermont and New Hampshire put together, right? Talking about 46,000 square kilometers, and it integrates multiple adjacent or overlapping protected areas such as, protected parks, indigenous reservations, and sustainable use areas. And it takes these areas and manages them in a single unit under, the auspices of Brazil's Ministry of the Environment, Ministério do Meio Ambiente. And it integrates, diverse management goals. It promotes landscape connectivity. It fosters, collaboration between the government and local communities, right? So just for a quick fact check. And then you guys can just Google at your leisure there what a mosaico is and what its component parts are and what the concept of mosaico is. As you know, this isn't an area that's cordoned off, It's set in stone, with a barbed wire fence or anything like that around it, but it's kind of very more of a concept. It's a statement, and it's a land, that definitely creates, local, divisions of labor and cooperation and solidarity, between all the players in the region, which we'll show you in a second here. Okay, so here are the main stakeholders, indigenous groups that live in this region, the Awaguajá, folks I've been working with since 1990. Their neighbors, the Guajajara, also known as Tenetejara. I've seen that in the literature plenty, that Mércio Gomes worked with them, the former president of Funai, another former Gator, and Charles Wagley, worked with them too. Right? The Kapo, that worked among them was Bill Belay, right? And the Tembe, they are kind of like an offshoot group of the Guajajara. They migrated over to um, Pará State back, I think, in the 1850s, if I'm not mistaken. And then there was a small family of Chimbira, a G group. The first four that you see listed there, they're Tupi-Guarani, and their languages are almost kind of mutually intelligible. It's interesting that the Awa Guajá, if you look in the literature, they are referred to more as Guajá, but so you don't confuse them with other Tupi-Guarani groups who use their ethnonym, Awa, which stands for man, person, and people, with Guajá, right? But they, interestingly enough, as foragers or former foragers, they understand the other groups easier than, the other way around, right? It's kind of like Portuguese and Spanish speakers, right? Usually the Portuguese speakers can understand Spanish speakers a little bit easier, than the other way around, right? And then we have a number of non-indigenous communities there too, like the local settled people by Incra in the region and so on. And we are still resolving some issues with people who are settled there in the Reserva Biológica Gurupi, and that's something that's being determined by INCRA right now. As you know, this took a long time for us to be able to sort out because there were a lot of poachers, a lot of settlers on the Indian reserves. And back in 2012, we launched a big campaign with Survival International to help, put those families out and then get INCRA to determine, a new place for them. This is particularly in the Terra Indígena, Awa, right? Which, took years and years, for them to actually um, score for, the Awa Guajá. And it removes this kind of like archipelago effect, between the reserves. As you know, it's always better to have contiguous reserves because that way it removes that invasive effect, if you will, for the settlers. So here's some significant people that you should know about. These are Awaguaja men. Um, this was back in the early days of contact, the first contact, permanent contact that was established between them and the mainstream society was back in 1973. They're on the Alto Turiaçu Reserve, right? And um, an indigenous outpost called Cocal at this day and age, right? And the man on the left, Carapiru, he became a very emblematic figure in the plight of these people, and that his family, okay, was camped out near, okay, an estate in Maranhão in a place called Porto Franco, right? And a dog noticed them, started barking. The security personnel of the estate, or the jagunços, okay, ran over there and started opening fire on him. So his whole family was killed, okay, in that incident. And so he had to beat a retreat to the forest. And he survived for like 10 years. Okay, this was 1978. And then he wandered as far south as Bahia, right, just on his own, just showing, okay, just the knowledge of the forest and everything, and just all, the psychological reserves that you have to be able, okay, to survive, okay, in that situation, right? This is his cousin on the left, Yacaretin. It means white caiman. Yeah, Yacaré, right? Chin, and means white, right? Um, he, okay, also was kind of pushed out, okay, and was forced to disperse, okay, from his particular band and was found all the way down south in Minas Gerais, right? So luckily, okay, they were both repatriated. Funai was trying to sort out who they were, which, okay, ethnic group they belonged to, and luckily they were able to encounter people who had already been settled to go there and identify them. In the case of Carapiru, he was separated from his son, who got stuck in a barbed wired fence. And then when the personnel, the security personnel of the state caught him, they took him over to Funai, and Funai settled him into the recently settled Cocao community, right? So it's actually was his son, okay, Chiramukum, who was sent to Brasilia to identify him, right? And it was a really emotional re-encounter between the two of them, right? So these are, I think, some of the emblematic figures and significant people of this whole plight. Remember, these, among all the groups here, of the indigenous groups we're speaking of, these are the only ones that were foragers. Okay, the Kapó, Tembé, and the Guajajara are all settled horticulturalists, right? And moving on, okay, this is an area that has lots of different ecosystems, right? Excuse me. We have, the proverbial, terra firme, which in its own right also has little mosaics in it and everything. We have blackwater ecosystems, okay, even though this is not, okay, an aerial photograph of the area. It's where, confluence of the Solimões there and the Rio Negro there in Manaus. But, well, wouldn't you know, you have blackwater ecosystems there too in this region, right? The southern part of this region has some cerrados too. Again, this transition zone as you move further south, right, in Maranhão. And then naturally we have you got ball forests. These are just some of the macro areas, not to mention, for example, the anthropogenic zones that are also present there. So a number of you probably recognize, okay, the Babaçu, right? Okay, Ataleia speciosa. And this is actually at the community that I mentioned to you a minute ago, Cocao, where the first group of Awa were settled, right? They approached, okay, a couple of backwoodsmen, Mateiros, who were later hired by Funai at this particular location there. And once, okay, they were encountered, okay, Funai decided the Sertanistas of Funai set up a little outpost right there. This used to be an old Kapor village, okay, and then the Kapor, okay, moved, okay, to another location in this reserve, right, and then the Awa, okay, settled it, right, and this is one of the interesting interplays between some of these groups, okay, the foragers are kind of like peripheral groups to the settled groups. They had kind of like an uneasy relation between them. Sometimes they would steal crops and so on, retreat to the forests, and in retaliation, the settled groups would run after them, right? if you read the handbook, South American Indians, there's a short excerpt there by Nguyen Daju, who like just like 2 pages on the Awa, and he never met them, but this was information that was given to him by the Tembe, right? They had actually encountered a group of Awa, and they kind of like held them prisoner, and they expired unfortunately because they ate, the seasoned food of the Tembe, right? They weren't used to it. They forced people with a unique diet of their own. Even though when we talk about foragers, we talk about this broad spectrum diet. Many of us, okay, we definitely, okay, when we eat new foods, have quite, adverse reactions to them. In the case of the Kapo and the Awa, okay, they had tense relations for a long time until there was the Pax Brasiliana back in the 1980s, which kind of united these groups, and now we have like intermarriages between both groups. They get along, even though the Kapo are considered like the bigger brothers in this situation. But this is really an interesting place because this is an old Kapwa village, which was settled by the Awa, right? And there's many resources from the Babasu, okay? Everything from medicinal resources and building materials, okay? You can eat the seeds, okay, in the chambers, okay, the Babasu nut, okay, the mesocarp, which in the past that was be their main, okay, staple when they were camped out at these particular areas here, right? And yeah, it's definitely a valuable resource. And if you travel the Carajás Railroad, okay, sometimes you look on either side of the railroad, you see Babasu stands as far as the eye can see, right? So this is something that's always been created in the wake of human activities. We're always debating till this day and age, okay, whether this was a purposeful type of intervention or whether it's just something like the net effect of people's activities. But there you go, you have it, and they're playing with it and they're dealing with it, right, in a very, I think, healthy and sustainable way, right? And as you can see here, these pindovas here in the understory, these puppies right here, they can be on the forest floor. They're just waiting for a light gap for as long as 50 years, according to Andy Anderson, waiting just for that light gap to spring up and become, an adult Babasu. Anthony Anderson, I think he recorded Babasu as old as 184 years, right? And he could probably stretch that limit a little bit more, but these are the hardiest palms you can ever imagine. And in their seed chambers too, you also have these little um, the bruket beetle, okay, leaves its larva there. And I don't know if some of you've eaten insects in your travels in the Amazon, but that's really tasty, the larva. Okay, it tastes like kind of like bacon. Okay, and you could stir fry it with manioc flour, farinha, and it's really really good. And they use it a lot as fish bait too. It's also a downtime food, okay, in hard times, right, for regional groups and peasant groups and indigenous peoples. Okay, so moving on here. Remember, this is an area, it's called the Centro de Endemismo Belém. So, what's also important about this region is that you have a lot of biological endemism. And so, Bill Blay, okay, in his um, surveys there, when he collected a lot of plants in the region, he found quite a few, unique species germane to the area. I've collected a lot of fish species, and apparently, okay, those species are also unique to the area as well. The fish they call branquinhas and some subspecies of piranhas in this region. Right? Well, you can see it's a very compromised region. Okay, just hovering my little cursor over here, and you can see that it is a must to have. Okay. And when it comes down to it, okay, the only areas that are more or less intact, okay, are the indigenous areas that you can see right there. Right? So on the Pará side, you can see the upper part here of the Alto Rio Guamá, it's been seriously compromised, okay, because again, like I mentioned, this is an area that used to be like the Celeiro de Belém, right, back in the day, right? Okay, so I may be be mistaken on this number right here. You see at the top bullet point. I think there's more mosaicos in Brazil than 24 right there. I think that there are a few more have been established recently. But it brings together efforts to engage actors who were formerly antagonistic to one another, okay, like the indigenous groups that I mentioned, plus naturally, okay, the settled communities and the indigenous peoples, right? They're sitting at the same table and saying, yay, great, we got this land area, let's work together, right? And okay, it sets out to provide the social environmental protection. And it's Brazil's first mosaico, okay, with a special focus on indigenous peoples, right? So it enhances the protection of an area rich in biological endemism, which is, constantly okay, under threat because we also have, after all, that big mining project there, the Carajás Railway, which cuts, okay, right through the middle of the mosaic. And as you know, the Carajás Railway, I think it impacts around 40 indigenous communities in both Maranhão and Pará, okay? All the way there from Porto de Itaqui and São Luís, all the way to the Carajás mining range. We're talking about 500 miles of railway. So that definitely created a lot of growth and development in the region. And with all that movement, there are that many more, okay, people invading indigenous areas. So this became a must, okay, for us to be able to establish. So how did it all start? Okay. I answered to a call for proposals by ARPA, the Programa de Áreas Protegidas da Amazônia, né, by the Ministério do Meio Ambiente, right? And we weren't able to get our act together in time, okay, to answer to the first call of proposals, but they wrote back to us and actually gave us a call and says, submit, resubmit, okay? Because I was trying to get a bunch of people together, okay, to come on board with this, okay. At first, a lot of people were pretty indifferent about the whole idea or just shrugged their shoulders at it. But I got a couple of friends there at the Geldy Museum on board with this. And I'd like to give a shout out to Marluce Martins. I'll show you a picture of her in a minute. She was definitely fantastic, a real mover and shaker in getting this together, right? So, as you know, I live here in the States. Okay, I only go to Brazil like at the end of the year and during the summer, like a lot of you do, right? To do your research or visit family, et cetera, et cetera. So you need somebody who's permanently anchored there, articulating, okay, with all the players to get things moving, right? So she, with some colleagues and some students, okay, she started making community visits. I introduced her to people, but she took it from there. And then slowly this garnered a lot of traction, right, from all players, okay, across the board. She was very well articulated, both people in government and research institutions, right? And okay, with Fundo Amazônia was also critical, okay, particularly, okay, through a fellow by the name of Marcos Pinheiro, who really was able to bring all the communities together there and start explaining, okay, the benefits of the mosaico, right? Remember, a lot of these people actually were in league with loggers in the past, just for you to get an idea. And once they saw this proposal, they definitely left that life behind, thank God, right? So here are the main allies and collaborators that we've been working with. Okay, some of you recognize some of these acronyms right here. Funai was very enthusiastic. As you know, we're dealing with a different Funai at this day and age. When I first started working with the AWA, it was definitely a different Funai that wasn't very researcher friendly, right? And, I had a lot of tense, situations with Funai, particularly the Sertanistas, they're the old guard. The leftover, okay, from the military regime. So, but they're the kind of reactionary people. They're corrupt. They're always asking for money and the rest of it. But another key player here too was ESPN, Sociedade para Proteção de Natureza, right? Okay, and the principal player right here is João Guilherme. He's the guy who really became the mover and shaker in the final steps of establishing, okay, the mosaic, right? Fundamazone, ICMBio. You guys recognize all those names there, and I can spell all of them out to you. But the main research institutions are here at the bottom, right? Okay, MPEG, Museu Paraense Emílio Guilde, and Universidade Federal do Maranhão, right? So, this is finally okay after years and years. Okay, we had a big lull period during the pandemic, right? And one of the fellows that I showed you in the previous pictures there, Carapiru, he expired, unfortunately. He was in his mid 70s. All of the indigenous players there, I was so surprised that during the pandemic, they actually got priority, okay, in the first rollout for vaccines. Some of you may have heard of CoronaVac, okay, the vaccine that Instituto Butantan developed with, okay, a Chinese partner, right? And all of the Awa got vaccinated. They had like 2 doses of vaccines, but uh, because of their all of the movement that they've had over the years, okay, and being kind of enticed and pulled into local towns and villages to visit people, they ended up, okay, getting infected. But they are hardy, hardy, hardy people. It's amazing because in the first days of contact, um, I saw history repeating itself there. Between 1976 and 1980, in a period of 4 years, that one village I mentioned to you, there's actually five Awag villages now, but that village, Kokal, okay, with the introduction of malaria and influenza, they lost 2/3, okay, of their population. So in this chaos, okay, they were able to rebuild themselves. They had good players come into the fold and articulate, with the health, okay, professionals, okay, and the government, okay, to rebuild their communities. And well, when they got COVID, I was surprised, okay, how well, okay, they were able to tide through, okay, the whole situation. But anyway, my point is that there was this lull period during the Bolsonaro government, okay, when we were gaining a lot of momentum to really start, you know, instituting the mosaico. Well, naturally, he wasn't too Indian friendly, but again, I was surprised that they got the first rollout in the vaccines right there. But anyway, this is Mata Lucia right here. Okay, my friend, Mata Lucia, she's a biologist there at the Geldy Museum. She is an entomologist, okay, works with insects, mostly bees and wasps, okay. And this is Eloisa Miranda. She works with ICMBio there in the Reserva Biológica Gurupi, we also call it Rebio Gurupi. So these became the main articulators in moving this forward and just getting all people together to sit down at the table and discuss, okay, all the potentials and limits of establishing, okay, the mosaic. So this was by in July, okay, once everything was kind of herded through the system. Um, Mariana Silva was going to sign off, but she had to cancel, right? Mariana Silva, now, the Minister of the Environment, okay, here she is right here holding up the document that she signed, but she had to cancel once, so we had to hold off for a couple of months. And then finally, just on the spur of the moment, we were all invited there to Brasilia, okay, to celebrate the establishment, okay, of the mosaic. So here's some of the players here. So the Awa, okay, some Awa, some folks, okay, from the Tembé community, the Guajajara there. Sônia Guajajara also showed up, also did Wapixana, okay. So it was a really, really big to-do, and we were really, really pleased with it. But uh, now, okay, that it's down, okay, in black and white, it's an official mosaic. It means that once we now start submitting proposals, okay, we have a legitimate, okay, established, okay, piece of land where we can establish projects. And if any of you are interested, just reach out. We can start talking about these things here. But moving on, okay, here are some prospects and challenges, right? We have one thing is that we're creating this unity of all the players in the area, right? Okay, even former poachers, okay, are finding okay benefits in doing this, right? Calibration now, okay, we can apply for funding since it's a legitimate mosaic. Challenges, however, as well, how long will the current political situation last? Okay, we know the recent polls that we saw, okay, we don't know how it's kind of neck and neck, okay, between Lula and Flávio Bolsonaro, right? So they're going to have to get energetic, okay, to keep maintaining, okay, the current government in place, right? Uh, Lessons learned from the past projects, okay, can we look at the salvageable notions, okay, from former projects that had both successes and failures? And then, what about the land situation in Amazonia? We know it's still a very, very, very contested place, right? So it's not the easiest, okay, because it's a very large area to patrol, to monitor. Have forest guards, okay, from both the government, from both the indigenous communities as well, okay. Os Guardiões da Floresta, right? They're doing a pretty good job, but well, it's a very, very large area. So they're going through lots of transformations, these communities here. You can see some of them are engaged in cattle ranching. And this case here, it's not cattle that they bought, it's cattle that, okay, they absconded from invaders. Right? They kicked the people off the land and they kept the cattle, right? But they're okay into breeding some of these animals too. You see a kid here, okay, he's kind of a little modern there, okay, with dyed hair and the rest of it, right? Uh, oh, you got guys, okay, riding motorcycles, visiting the local towns, going to local bars, et cetera, et cetera. And a lot of this is stuff that's given to them by Vale do Rio Doce, the big mining company, which has kind of appeased many of the groups, even though they shut down the railroad on a number of occasions by giving them, okay, all these benefits here. Right? Vale do Rio back hard, though, okay, is threatening them if there's any demonstrations that they're going to cut any kind of support that they've been giving them, right? But it's support that they're giving them in the area of education, okay, in the area of agriculture and health, even though now we have, okay, the SESAI, right, the Secretaria Especial de Saúde Indígena, that's something that's established, okay, in the late 90s when the Fernando Henrique Cardoso government, right, the administration, when, okay, he removed from FUNAI the responsibility, okay, for the area of health, which I thought was a good move because FUNAI kind of like many indigenous groups were hostage to, okay, a lot of the machinations of FUNAI. We've had lots of new administrations come through under the administration of Março Meira. Okay, he really did an interesting job in reformulating Funai. Right? Some of them weren't too good, but he hired a bunch of new people who were a lot more college educated, and instead of all these backwoodsmen who can some be very corrupt, there was a lot of corruption in Funai right here in these communities too, where they were siphoning off money, okay, from Vale do Rio Doce, okay, for their own pockets, leaving many of these communities languishing. But well, when Márcio Gomes was the president of the FUNAI, he investigated, fired those people. New people came in, thankfully. But as you can see, lots of transformations. The speed and velocity of transformations is amazing. And believe it or not, folks, okay, these guys are teaching me how to use this better. You know, I was actually texting them once. Okay, this is a few years back, and he says, "Hey Louis, why don't you just send us an audio message, right?" Anyway, okay, there's other players also coming into the fold. You folks are familiar with CIMI, né? Conselho Indigenista Missionário. They have school teachers there. Many of them are being alphabetized. Okay, it's kind of like a first grade education that many of them are getting, but you have different players in different communities, right? This fellow, for example, right here, okay, he's an evangelical missionary. He works with Além, né? A Voz do Além, right? Associação Evangélica Linguística Missionária. These guys are trained there, as you know, at the Summer Institute of Linguistics and the rest of it, right? And some of them, okay, are good. Some of them are bad. Okay, I can't criticize this fellow because when all that corruption was going on in this particular community, they had nobody from Funai working there, okay, taking care of things. This was a community that was really languishing. So he kind of filled the void, and then he was hired by the Maranhão's Secretaria na Educação, and has been teaching them all the subjects, but he also wants to preach the word, right? Okay, then naturally we still have poachers and everything going on in the area. And as you know, here is, okay, some of the impacts of the Carajás Railway, right? You can see the train here, okay, in the lower right-hand corner, and this is a railway that's been duplicated, right? It used to just be one railroad going up and down, extracting the minerals there from Serra dos Carajás and then taking them there to Porto Itaqui and São Luís do Maranhão, and then off to the European Economic Community. But now, okay, Brazil's biggest trading partner is China. China and Japan is also tapping into all this stuff here. So they duplicated the railway. Okay, so trains are running there 24/7 up and down that railway. And you have a lot of smelters here too, because carvão vegetal, right? To make the pig iron here. And right here is the Carajás Railway. Okay, it's running just south, okay, of the Pindaré River. And these are the southern limits of the Caru Reservation, right? And one of the reservations there that I contemplated in this area. So yes, let me just close by, okay, revisiting, okay, the title of my talk. Okay, these are lots of words that are being bantered about at this day and age. We're talking about space, place, and memory. As you know, the last 500 years, okay, with all the aggression and moving people here, dispersing them, fragmenting them, many groups actually didn't come from this region. The Awa and the Kapo, for example, we think they came from an area between, the Rio Moju and Tocantins, there in Pará State. And because of the conflict with the Cabanagem back in the 1830s and 40s, okay, lots of groups were pushed east, right? And the Kapo, as a matter of fact, made it as far as the Atlantic Ocean, then they came back, right? And we're not sure if the Awa themselves were actually just like a kind of like a satellite group of, okay, the Kapo in times past. Remember, okay, the works of Bill Belay talks about when he looks at the cognates and compares, okay, all the crops that the Kapoor plant. The Awa, okay, even though they don't cultivate anything or didn't cultivate anything, they're very familiar with these crops, okay? Was it because they raided them, okay? Or were they kind of like off and on again, okay, kind of subservient to them? It's kind of like the Macu with the Chikuna up there in the Northwest Amazon, right? Or like, for example, the big pygmies and the Bantu farmers in Africa. Okay, these satellite groups really not sure, okay, if they were, okay, foragers, or okay, if they just split off and became foragers, right? If history forced them. So, okay, it's home now. Nonetheless, okay, this area here is going to give them some security. Okay, ownership. Okay, ownership has always been a funky type of concept, especially when you talk with indigenous peoples, right? Okay, the idea of land, okay, is elusive. When you're talking about hunting zones for among the Awa, for example, one fellow will say, "Okay, I hunt over here." Okay, and another fellow, okay, his neighbor says, "Oh, I hunt over there." They're not saying that's my land, right, or anything like that. The idea of property is still, a very elusive concept, right? But okay, they now with all these interlocutors coming in, people giving them advice saying, well, land means security, right? So yeah, definitely, okay, we need this here, okay, definitely enhance, okay, your security and make you more viable, right? This is also, okay, going to usher in, okay, a number of projects in cultural revitalization in the area of linguistics. I work with a crew that is actually helping, okay, restore the language there, right? And in addition to, okay, speaking of restoration, okay, the restoration of degraded areas. And as you can see on the maps that I showed you earlier, okay, that is an area that's definitely under quite a bit of threat, from all kinds of things going on. Anyway, I'll stop right there, okay, and I'll open it up to questions right now from any of you.
Great.